oftentimes a weakness or perceived weakness or a struggle that you're going through as a company or as a person causes you to overcompensate and create a superpower. What's up, guys? This is Joe Hamilton with another episode of Create a Rare Experience, a podcast which is all about creating unique, memorable, personalized experience and trying to give you momentum and your organization momentum. And speaking of momentum, that is one of my favorite topics. And I've got some unique ways that I think you can create momentum for yourself and for your business. It's a little bit different. There's a lot of different ways that you can create momentum, but this is one of my favorites. Whenever I recommend this tactic of coming up with momentum, it seems to be really well received. But in order to do this, we've got to go back. We've got to hop in our time machine, and we've got to go back to 2002. So 2002 is technically when Vortex got started. And it took us roughly about 13, 15 years to go from zero to number one in sport optics. And there was a myriad of ways why we did that, but there was one way that I discovered back then that always stuck with me. And prior to Vortex launching in 2002, our company was a retailer. And we had a Wild Birds Unlimited store, a small store, and eventually out of that grew Eagle Optics, which ended up becoming one of the largest, if not the largest, independent sport optics company in the country. So we were retailers, okay? We were retailers, and we were gonna jump into the game of being a brand and being a manufacturer and wholesaling to other retailers. So if you think about that, we're going from something that we know, being a retailer, to jumping into something that we don't know, being a brand, manufacturer, wholesaler. So technically, we should actually be behind the curve. Technically, we should be weak where other brands and manufacturers are strong, okay? And what I discovered was that actually being a retailer was a forged superpower, okay? When you're a retailer, and for those of you that are in retail, you know it is a dog-eat-dog world. It is a 24/7, 365 grind. You are fighting, scratching, and clawing for sales. But what I found was that it was actually an advantage that we went from retailer to being a manufacturer and a wholesaler. And I'm gonna tell you why. But again, we're gonna go back in time, and I'm gonna share a few stories and then unpack this. And then I'm gonna share some personal stories, because it's not just about creating momentum for our business, it's about creating momentum for us personally. So we were recently a new brand in Vortex. We were wholesaling to other retailers. And there was one phone call in particular that I took. Actually, it was a call that I had made to one of our new retailers, and we'd want to check up with them about once a month at the time. And we wanted to see, how is the product selling? Do they need any more? Is some of the product selling and some of it's not? We'll take back the stuff that isn't selling. We'll get them more of what they are selling, et cetera, et cetera. There could be a number of reasons or ways that we were hoping to serve our retailers. So we wanted to stay in touch with them on a regular basis, which, by the way, was fairly unique for the time. But that's not the purpose of this story. I remember calling a retailer, and he said to me, Joe, I actually do need more product, but I just need one binocular. And I said, oh, you just need one binocular? No problem. I'm all over that. I'll get that binocular out to you. He said, no, Joe. He said, not a case pack. I don't want 10. I don't want 5. I don't want 2. I want 1 unit. I said, yes, sir. I hear you. I'm going to send out 1 unit. And he said, Joe, I need to hear you say you are not going to send me a case pack, because I just need one. I said, sir, I guarantee you I'm going to send you 1 unit. I am not going to send you a case pack. Now, little did he know, in my head, I was thinking, what's a case pack? I didn't even realize what a case pack was. And obviously, when you box up your product, a lot of times they are in a larger case rather than just one. But of course, being a retailer before, we were mainly selling to an individual customer. So that's all we really did was we sold one unit to one person. On top of that, it just so happened I was going to be the one who box it and ship it myself because we were so small, you had to wear a lot of different hats. But you see, being a retailer and already having the habit pattern of sending out one unit, it wasn't a big burden for us to break a case pack and sell that one unit. So that's an example of where being a retailer ahead of time just so happened to work out really well for us selling to other retailers. Because let's be honest, a lot of retailers, especially those mom and pop shops, which if you add them all up together, they are a force to be reckoned with, but they're ordering in smaller quantities than those big box stores. Often they're just looking for one and they're looking for two. And if they were to receive a case pack, they're going to have too much, they're going to be carrying too much inventory, and that's going to really hurt their bottom line. So that was one thing. Now, my dad at the time, he knew that, but me being pretty young, I didn't know that or really appreciate that that was advantage being a retailer. I'm going to give you a couple other examples. I'll never forget, I was walking through our copier room, okay, which also doubled as a place where people could eat. It also doubled as a place where we would hold our birthday parties because there were so few people. But in the copier room, we had our fax machine. And that fax machine was like a magic fax machine. So a lot of you remember the old fax machines with the slimy fax paper. A lot of people would send their orders via fax. And so you'd breeze through the copier room, you'd look at the fax machine, and the reason I called it magic was because sometimes there was, 3, 4, 5, 10 orders there. But when Vortex was going and Eagle Optics was going, we had a shared fax machine and a shared fax line. Again, we were small. So one time I'm going by the fax machine, and there's one fax paper on the floor, like crumpled up like a piece of trash. So of course I go and I pick up that fax paper, and I turn it over, and on it I see a $50,000 purchase order that Eagle Optics had put in with another brand because they're a retailer. They were selling all brands. Now, $50,000 purchase order, that's big now, but back then it was massive. And I can tell you with the orders I was taking for Vortex, they were like in the $500 range. I think the largest order I had was $2,200 at the time. So a $50,000 purchase order, it might as well have been $50 million for me. So I grabbed this purchase order because it's basically like a gold bar. And I decided to go over to the Eagle Optics, the buyers, and say, hey guys, you left this incredibly large purchase order on the ground. They kind of looked at me and they said, yeah, that's, thanks, Joe, but that's actually the 4th or 5th time we've put in that purchase order with that brand. We still haven't heard back from them. I mean, my jaw was on the floor. If I had been taking $50,000 purchase orders, I'd have been driving them down myself, rolling out the red carpet, having a band playing. That's how excited I would have been. And I remember thinking, you know what? If we're competing at Vortex with folks that won't get back to you on a $50,000 purchase order, meanwhile, I'm getting back to people on a $500 purchase order within seconds, then it's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time for us to overtake these brands because they don't have a sense of urgency. And you know who does have a sense of urgency? Retailers have a sense of urgency. When that phone rings, a retailer knows they need to have a person who's going to answer that phone. When somebody leaves a voicemail, a retailer knows we need to get back to you extremely fast. Another thing that retail knows is your customer service better be good, okay? When it's B2C, business to customer, retail, those customers, if they're not getting the service they want, if they're not getting the speed that they want, they're out and they're on to the next retailer. You know what else retailers are good at? They're good at shipping stuff extremely fast, okay? They want to get your item out that day and get you a tracking number. That gives the customer the warm and fuzzies. That keeps the customer coming back. I could go on and on and on. Retailers are scrappy, they are hungry, and they are fast, and they have incredibly good service. Those were all things that we had built. They were forged in our company as retailers for years. And then when we translated over to a brand, a manufacturer, and wholesale, holy cow, we were taking all of that, which was pretty normal. Now, we were good at retail at it, but also it was more normal in that world. And we took it to this wholesaling manufacturer world, and it was rare. Nobody was doing it. One thing I discovered back then was B2B, business to business. Often customer service and responsiveness and a sense of urgency isn't there. It's not like it is from a B2C standpoint. So all those years being forged in the fire as a retailer, man, did they really translate over as a brand. And that really illustrates the principle that I want to get to you today, okay? And that is oftentimes a weakness or perceived weakness or a struggle that you're going through as a company or as a person causes you to overcompensate and create a superpower. I'm going to call it a forged superpower. In fact, I've got something I'm going to read to you. We wrote it the other day. A forged superpower shaped by pressure, strengthened through adversity, and refined into something you couldn't have developed any other way. So that's what happened. When we went back and looked and the struggle that it is to open a retail store and then to keep it going and then to be successful at it, oh my goodness, we developed a superpower. We've developed all that speed, that customer service, that sense of urgency, the responsiveness, the creativity, the ability to pivot and flex on a dime that all successful retailers have. And then we translated that over to a brand. Now, again, having conversations with my dad, he knew that that was going to be a superpower because he had been a retailer for all those years and he had also purchased from all of those brands. But I was in my early 20s, just out of college, and I didn't know. So experientially, it was a great opportunity for me to learn that principle of a forged superpower. You go back, you see where you have struggled, you see your weakness, okay? In this case, we were small, we didn't have a lot of money. We had to win people over with service. We had to win people over with speed. We had to win people over with a sense of urgency. That was the overcompensation, which developed a superpower, okay? I hope you're getting that. To find this forged superpower, go back in time, find the struggle, find the perceived weakness, and find where you had to overcompensate. And again, that's your superpower. It is also going to give you a really good opportunity to go back on some areas that maybe you've got some anxiety about, you've got some regret about, you've got maybe some bad feelings about, and discover that there was actually something really good that came out of it. So let's kind of go with that theme and let's translate over to the personal side. Does this work from a personal perspective? And so I'm going to share some stuff personally and how this same principle applied for me and how it can apply for you. So for me, you may not be able to tell on video here, but I'm an undersized guy, okay? And I was really into sports. I was into football. I was into basketball. And of course, being an undersized guy in both of those sports, okay, being vertically challenged and maybe just not having the raw genetics that some other people had, what I had to do, certainly felt like I had to do, is I had to over-index and work my butt off at everything else. So, I mean, I was in the weight room, I was running sprints, I was watching film. I mean, there wasn't a second of my day that I wasn't hardwired to figure out other ways to overcompensate for a lack of size and maybe just raw genetics. Now, interestingly enough, my sports career fizzled out in college football. I did play. I was a backup. I was not a star. And that was not my plan, okay? Grew up in the 80s and 90s, so I wasn't a quarterback, but, I was going to think wasn't going to be the next Joe Hamilton. I was going to be the next Joe Montana, all right? Didn't work out that way in college. All of that hard work, it got me about as far as my genetics were going to take me, but it didn't get me as far as I wanted to go. And that was devastating for me in my late teens and early 20s. And so when I got out of college and my dad was saying, hey, I'm getting ready to start this thing. Nobody's really helping me with it. Do you want to just give it a shot and maybe until you figure out what you really want to do? Well, what I had discovered once I got started at Vortex and we started from zero was that work ethic that I had forged all those years in sports, which certainly helped me out in sports, but maybe didn't get me where I wanted to go. It did translate really well to the world of business, where maybe being 6'4" and 225, which I am not, wasn't needed. So my perceived weakness, and this area that I felt I needed to overcome, being undersized, caused me to overcompensate with hard work, and being scrappy and figuring out all these other ways to overcompensate. It developed a superpower, a forged superpower, which, although it didn't translate as well in sports, it translated really well in business. And of course, it wasn't just me. We just so happened to have a lot of really hardworking and scrappy individuals at the start of Vortex, and we still do. Now, for me to kind of make peace with that personally, looking back from a sports perspective, that was incredibly helpful. So when I look back at that time for years, I sort of wanted to avoid it. I always thought, man, I was a failure when it came to sports. I never lived up to my lofty expectations. It was kind of an area I just didn't want to look at. But when I go back now and I think of that area, I think of it as a real positive. I think of it as a way that it forged a superpower, which I was able to leverage on the Vortex side. So again, going back to, it's really not a tactic, it's a principle. I believe everybody has a superpower. Maybe some people have multiple superpowers, Not just strengths, but strengths that are real high leverage points. And I believe the best way to find those isn't just to do a strengths finder thing or just talk to somebody and say, what do you think my strengths are? That's okay. You can do that. But I think you're better off if you go back in time into those areas that maybe you don't like looking at, just like I didn't like looking at my sports career and how it sort of fizzled out. Realize there was an area where you had a weakness or an area where you had struggle and you had to overcompensate in another area. And I'm telling you, where that overcompensation was, it developed a superpower. So when I look back and I say, hey, this thing that happened to sports, it was a negative thing that happened to me. Now I can look at that and say, no. This was something that happened for me. It happened for me, and I was able to develop this superpower. And now my goal is, with knowledge, with this illumination, now my goal is, how do I deploy that? How do I best deploy that now in my business? How do I best deploy that now in my personal life? So one more time again, to find your superpower, to find your forged superpower. And for some of you, it might be even a hidden superpower. We need you to go back, find the struggle, find the weakness, find the overcompensation, find your forged superpower, and deploy it. Listen, guys, movements are built on connection. If this resonated, share it and join the conversation. Hit that subscribe button or check the show notes where you can follow me on all my socials. Or check out more about the movement at vortexcare.com. Let's build something rare together.